this is just a quick video to show you how you can make your own book board out of cardboard boxes if you don't have book board. Now normally for my binding I'll use 2mm or 1800 GSM board. It's called different things in different parts of the world, but this is specifically for people who are doing my bind your own books project and who may not have access to book board. Also, I'm doing this now specifically for the miniature books, and for those I would not, you can use this, but I find it's generally better to use a somewhat thinner board. So I've been using what I think is about a 900 GSM. That's sort of variable, you can use more or less, but what I want to show you now is that you can also simply use a box, a cereal box, or this was a porridge box, and I did that a fair bit during lockdown, when I wasn't sure when I'd be able to get bored again. And I just want to show you some basic ways of working with it. This is obviously for miniature books, so it wouldn't work for a bigger book. The first thing to do, now obviously not all of this is usable. I'll just chop these edges off, and you can see what we can use. And there will be certain variations in different types of things, so this isn't for anything too precise, but it's perfectly adequate for the projects that I'm doing this for. The first thing to do is to check the grain direction. As I've said in the videos where I show the whole project, paper and board has a grain direction, and it's important that you think about that when you're planning things. Now this is this way, so what we want is to make sure that our cover boards are going to be like that, which means that we should be able to get use 4 of these panels, I think. Let me just check this one. Yes, that's big enough. Okay, so the first thing to do, well, yes, what I'll do then is just cut it in half, because we'll then glue 2 pieces. Yeah, just looking at the size. Yeah, I mean, you sort of have to work out how to get the sizes you want out of it. But before one actually glues it, because it's coated, that's not going to glue too easily. What I'm going to do, what helps, is to actually just sand this fairly roughly, and ideally you should do this outside and possibly also wearing a mask, because there's probably some nasty things in here. I'm just using a fairly rough sandpaper, although you could probably use something smoother. And you don't have to do it too much, but just go over it so that it's not shiny and smooth anymore. And then when you've got that, basically what I would do is take your PVA glue. You could do it with a roller, but I would sort of use reasonably thickish PVA for this. And just glue on here. The sanding, it basically just helps the glue to bond more, because you'll have a problem with that if you don't. The basic principle with this is that, as with many things in binding, is what you do to the one side you should do to the other. because every layer of glue or paper or board glued to something will pull it in a particular direction. So you basically want to make sure that it pulls evenly on both sides, which is also why you're gluing the two printed sides towards each other. You could have them facing outwards too, but I think it works better like this, and you won't risk having your printing showing anywhere. So, well, what I would do now is just leave it briefly for a couple of minutes, just so that the glue can become slightly dried and tacky, and then we'll glue them together. Okay, I've left these for a couple of minutes. You don't have to do that, but it does mean that you'll have less glue coming out of the sides. So then I'll just place them on top of each other. Remember, of course, that we've checked for the grain direction, so that they both will have the grain running in the same way. And in this case also that the panels are pretty much the same. Okay, so I'll basically press them down. I'm going to briefly press them in my press, but if you don't have a press, then it's quite important to press it as well as you can. So I'd use a bone folder here and really go over it well. You can do that on both sides. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to put them between some scrap paper. Yeah. I'm going to put them between wax paper as well, just to protect. It's not really essential, but if glue comes out, then it stops me messing up my scrap paper. I'm just going to briefly press that. Okay, I briefly pressed it in the press. If you don't have a press, you could press these with some G-clamps, or else you could also do a DIY press. You could put G-clamps on the edges and press it with that, or you could simply at this point just put some heavy weights on top of it and leave it for a while. That should be fine as well. But if you've got a press, it helps to just sort of give it a brief press, and then I'd wipe off any excess glue. I mean, I could have been neater cutting the sides first, but I find it easier to just glue it, and then we'll precisely trim the edges to what we want when we use it. So I'll basically just put that back, put some weights on top of it, and let it sit for a couple of hours. It's now the next day, and I've left the board under weights. I took the wax paper out after a while, but I just left it between some scrap paper. So it's now dried, and as you can see, it's perfectly flat, which is an important thing. So it's now ready to use. What I'll do is I could do this when I want to use it, but what I would normally do is, because these were two panels, I'm just going to cut them. I'll normally just cut a straight, that's okay, line, and then before I use it, I would make sure that I have a right angle. I'll just mark that. So I could start using this then for my miniature books. I think it's about a millimeter. It varies slightly, but that would be quite suitable for a miniature book. If I wanted to do the same thing for a bigger book and I wanted a thicker board, then what I would do is I would do 2 of these and glue them together in the same way. But I'd rather do them with the layers facing in and then glue 2 of these together rather than just piling them up one on top of each other. But that will give you a board you could use. So it's really just a help in case you don't have access to board.